Here's what you're about to find out. How a one-legged Russian naval pilot became one of the most important voices in American air power. Why his own company erased his name but kept his engineering. And how the aircraft he helped set in motion became the most produced American fighter of the Second World War. In the summer of 1915, over the Gulf of Riga, a 21-year-old Russian naval pilot named Alexander Prokofiev de Seversky climbed into a wooden flying boat for his first combat mission. He was ordered to attack a German destroyer. He never reached it. Anti-aircraft fire hit the aircraft before he could release his bombs. The plane crashed, the bombs detonated, his observer was killed, and Seversky lost his right leg below the knee. He had been a combat pilot for less than a week. Doctors amputated what remained of the leg and fitted him with a wooden prosthesis. The military declared him unfit for flying duty. His career, by every reasonable measure, should have been over. It was not over. Alexander Nikolaevich Prokofiev de Seversky was born in 1894 in Tiflis, in the Russian Empire, present-day Tbilisi, Georgia. His family belonged to the nobility. His father, Nikolai, was one of the first Russians to own an aircraft and worked alongside Igor Sikorsky in the Imperial All-Russian Aero Club. Alexander learned to fly from his father before he was 15. Father and son would both serve as combat pilots in the First World War, a rare pairing in that conflict. At 10, Seversky entered military school. At 20, he graduated from the Imperial Russian Naval Academy with an aeronautical engineering degree. He was a lieutenant in the Imperial Navy when the war began. He requested a transfer to aviation, was reassigned to the Baltic Fleet, and then came the crash. Seversky refused to accept the ruling that he would never fly again. To prove he could still operate an aircraft with one leg, he appeared unannounced at a military air show and performed an improvised aerial demonstration that stunned the officers on the ground. He was arrested afterward, but the spectacle reached Tsar Nicholas II. In July 1916, the Tsar personally intervened and returned him to combat duty. 3 days later, Seversky shot down his first enemy aircraft. Over the next year and a half, he flew 57 combat missions on one leg. He was credited with 6 confirmed victories, though his own claims were higher. What is not disputed is that he became the leading Russian naval ace of the First World War. He received the Order of St. George and the Gold Sword for bravery, one of the highest military honors in the Russian Empire. By 1917, at 23, he commanded his own fighter squadron in the Baltic Theater. He had one leg, a wooden prosthesis, and a chest full of decorations. Then the revolution came. In 1918, the new Bolshevik government sent Seversky to the United States as part of a Russian naval aviation mission. He traveled east across Siberia and arrived in America as Russia was collapsing into upheaval. He decided not to return. He would never see Russia again. He was 23, in a foreign country, with one leg, little money, and no real status beyond an assignment from a government that no longer existed. He spoke accented English and had the manners of Russian aristocracy, but the bank account of a refugee. He did what immigrants do. He survived. For a time, he ran a restaurant in Manhattan. A Russian nobleman and decorated war hero was serving meals in New York to pay rent. But Seversky had not come to America to wait tables. He had come because the country was building airplanes, and he understood airplanes better than almost anyone alive. In 1918, he offered his services to the War Department. General Kenly appointed him a consulting engineer and test pilot assigned to the Buffalo District of Aircraft Production. After the armistice, Seversky became an assistant to General Billy Mitchell, the leading American advocate of air power. Mitchell was fighting a bureaucratic war to prove that aircraft could sink battleships. Seversky helped make that case. The two men shared a conviction that the next war would be decided in the air. They also believed the military establishment was dangerously behind the times. Over the next several years, Seversky filed 364 patent claims. Among them was the first gyroscopically stabilized bomb sight developed with Sperry Gyroscope Company in 1923. The device improved bombing accuracy dramatically. He also contributed to in-flight refueling work. The one-legged pilot was not just designing aircraft. He was designing how aircraft would fight. The US government bought his bomb sight for $50,000. In 1923, Seversky used the money to found Seversky Aero Corporation, which made aircraft parts and instruments. That was only a beginning. He wanted to build complete airplanes. In 1931, he reorganized the business as Seversky Aircraft Corporation and moved operations to Farmingdale, Long Island. He secured Wall Street backing, made himself president, and also served as chief test pilot. A one-legged Russian immigrant, now an American citizen, was running his own aircraft company and personally flying the machines his engineers designed. The company's first major design was the SEV-3, an all-metal three-seat monoplane amphibian with a cantilever wing and hydraulically operated landing gear. It was advanced, elegant, and fast. Between 1933 and 1939, the SEV-3 set multiple speed records at the national air races. Seversky himself set a transcontinental speed record in 1938. He was not just signing drawings. He climbed into the cockpit and proved the aircraft himself. Seversky had also assembled a team of engineers, many of them Russian and Georgian expatriates. Among them was Alexander Kartveli, a Georgian-born aeronautical engineer who became the company's chief designer. Kartveli was methodical and technically brilliant, and his skill fit Seversky's vision. Together they began working on pursuit aircraft for the U.S. Army Air Corps. After several failed entries, Seversky Aircraft won a military competition in 1936 with the P-35, the company's first production fighter. The Army Air Corps ordered 77 of them. It was the first single-seat all-metal fighter with retractable landing gear and an enclosed cockpit to enter service with the Air Corps. The P-35 was not the fastest or best-armed fighter in the world, but it proved the company could design and build military aircraft the government would buy. The company kept developing prototypes. The AP-4 entered a competition in 1939 but lost to the Curtiss P-40. Still, the Air Corps liked its high-altitude performance enough to order additional test units. The design eventually evolved into the P-43 Lancer. None of that solved Seversky's business problems. He was a better engineer and showman than businessman. Production lagged, costs climbed, and investors grew restless. By 1939, Seversky Aircraft had accumulated heavy losses. Then a Swedish fighter contract vanished when Germany invaded Poland, and the American government imposed an embargo on military aircraft exports. Seversky's finances collapsed. In May 1939, while he was traveling outside the country, the board removed him as president. They went further and cut him off from the board entirely. In September, they renamed the company Republic Aviation. Seversky's name disappeared from the building, the letterhead, and the aircraft. Seversky sued. The legal fight dragged on. Then war arrived. After Pearl Harbor, the United States suddenly needed fighters in quantities the aviation industry had never produced before. Republic Aviation, the company that had expelled its founder, became one of the key manufacturers in the Allied war effort. Kartveli continued the design lineage Seversky had started. The Army Air Corps needed a fighter that could operate at high altitude, carry heavy armament, and outperform enemy aircraft. Kartveli first explored lighter concepts around the Allison V-1710, but they were not enough. The breakthrough came with the Pratt & Whitney R-2800 Double Wasp, a massive air-cooled radial engine producing more than 2,000 horsepower. Kartveli designed an airframe around it and added an exhaust-driven turbo supercharger in the rear fuselage to keep power at altitude. The result was huge. The barrel-shaped fuselage wrapped around the engine and turbo ducting. The aircraft weighed more than 10,000 pounds empty and over 17,500 pounds fully loaded. It became the heaviest single-engine fighter ever built. They called it the P-47 Thunderbolt. Pilots who first saw it did not think it could fight. It looked too large, too heavy, too unwieldy. They nicknamed it the Jug. Then they flew it and understood. The P-47 could dive faster than almost anything in the sky. Its heavy radial engine and sturdy frame let it absorb punishment that would have destroyed other fighters. It carried 8.50 caliber machine guns and could haul bombs and rockets in large quantities. A fully armed P-47 could deliver a devastating punch on ground targets. Its greatest trait was survival. The air-cooled engine had no liquid coolant system to puncture. A bullet through a water-cooled inline engine often meant a dead aircraft. A bullet through the R-2800 might kill one cylinder while the others kept firing. Pilots brought P-47s home with shredded wings, broken hydraulics, and flak damage that would have destroyed almost any other single-engine fighter. The P-47 entered combat in 1943 over Western Europe as a high-altitude escort. It soon proved even more valuable as a fighter bomber. It attacked German columns, rail yards, depots, and armored formations. Diving in at very high speed, it struck and pulled away before ground defenses could react. German troops came to fear the Thunderbolt's sound at low altitude because it meant destruction was seconds away. The 56th Fighter Group, flying P-47s exclusively, accounted for nearly half of all American aerial victories in the European theater. Across the war, the P-47 achieved an overall kill ratio of 4.6 to 1. Republic built the Thunderbolt at massive scale. Farmingdale produced more than 9,000. A second factory in Evansville added over 6,000 more. Another manufacturer built a small late-war batch under license. By the time production ended in 1945, Republic had built 15,686 P-47s, more than any other American fighter of the war. At the peak, 28 P-47s rolled off the line every day. The workforce grew to 24,000. The company that had nearly collapsed under Seversky and then expelled him became one of the most important aircraft manufacturers in the Allied war effort. Franklin Roosevelt visited the Evansville plant in 1943 to honor the workers. The Thunderbolt served in every theater: Europe, the Pacific, North Africa, China, Burma, India. It flew for Britain, France, Brazil, the Soviet Union, and other Allied nations. It intercepted V-1 flying bombs over England, provided close support during Normandy, and destroyed more ground targets in Europe than any other Allied fighter. The War Department spent more than $1.2 billion on P-47s during the war. Adjusted for inflation, that is well over $15 billion today. Every one of those aircraft traced its engineering lineage directly to the company Seversky had founded in the 1930s. While Republic was building the most important fighter of the war, Seversky was doing something else: writing. In 1942, he published Victory Through Air Power. His argument was blunt. The Allies would not win by land and sea power alone. They needed long-range strategic air power to break enemy industry, transport, and military infrastructure. The book became a bestseller and reached a huge audience. It also caught the attention of Walt Disney, who read it and decided the argument should reach even more people. Disney financed an animated feature based on the book, mixing animation, live action, and Seversky's own on-camera commentary. Released in 1943, the film went out through United Artists despite objections from the Army and Navy. It reached Franklin Roosevelt. It reached Winston Churchill. Churchill even requested that it be shown at the Quebec Conference, where Allied leaders were planning the bombing campaign against Germany. A one-legged Russian immigrant, through a film produced by Walt Disney, helped shape the highest levels of Allied air strategy. Meanwhile, Seversky never built another aircraft. After his legal settlement with Republic, he never regained control of a factory. Republic settled the dispute for an undisclosed sum, but by then, the company was printing money from P-47 production. He got compensation, but not what he really wanted, which was to keep building airplanes. Instead, he became one of the loudest and most effective advocates for air power in American history. He wrote more books, gave lectures, testified before Congress, and advised military leaders. In 1945, President Harry Truman awarded him the Medal for Merit. In 1969, he received the Exceptional Service Medal for decades of work as a special consultant to the Air Force Chiefs of Staff. He spent the rest of his life doing what he had done since youth, thinking about aircraft, arguing about aircraft, and insisting that the future belonged to whoever controlled the sky. Seversky died in New York City in 1974 at age 80 and was buried in the Bronx. Republic Aviation lived on after the war. It produced the F-84 Thunderjet and the F-105 Thunderchief, both part of the same Thunder lineage that began with the P-47. The engineering philosophy remained intact even after the founder's name had been erased. In 1965, Republic was acquired by Fairchild Aircraft. The company that had renamed itself to erase one founder was eventually absorbed and disappeared as well. The Farmingdale factory closed. Today, the site is an airport and a shopping center. A museum preserves the memory, but most people driving by have no idea what once stood there. Trace the line from 1915 to 1974, and the pattern is astonishing. A Russian nobleman learns to fly before he is 15. He is shot down on his first mission and loses a leg. The military tells him he will never fly again. He flies anyway. The Tsar personally returns him to combat. He becomes Russia's top naval ace. The revolution drives him out. He lands in America with nothing. He runs a restaurant. He files hundreds of patents. He builds a bomb site. He founds an aircraft company. He recruits the engineer who will design the most produced American fighter of World War II. His investors throw him out. His company builds the P-47 without him. He writes the book that helps shape Allied air strategy. He is honored by 2 American presidents. The P-47 Thunderbolt was the heaviest single-engine fighter of the Second World War. 15,686 were built. They flew in every theater and brought their pilots home through damage that would have killed almost any other machine. Every one of them carried the engineering DNA of the one-legged Russian immigrant who was kicked out of his own company before the first Thunderbolt ever flew. His name was not on the building. It was in the blueprints.